Well, I guess we can move into. These are the two indie comics I was mentioning last week that I somehow forgot.
Yeah.
These are self-published, and it's very clear when you look at them that they're indie comics because it's all black and white newsprint, basically. But also, I think you mentioning that, and that's kind of why these are the only two issues that were ever released of this.
What are the titles?
Three Car Pileup it's an anthology series, and Matt Boris, who illustrated War is Boring, which I brought back a few weeks back. He was one of the artists on this, and I think this was when he was living in Seattle doing political cartoons for The Stranger that he worked on this project. But it's him and a few other artists. It's really difficult to distribute something widely enough to keep it going, particularly for these indie comics. And I think Kickstarter really is a good tool to make that happen because otherwise it's just very difficult to do this. Because even with this, selling it at $250 for really cheap production values.
Yeah.
At a certain point, doesn't matter how good it is. If you're selling it on street corners and you're trying to,
if you aren't getting enough money going your way, then there's just only so much you can do. I mean,
it's certain printing costs and also just time spent on labor to produce it. You need to be bringing in at least as much as you're spending. Mm-hmm. Like you need to be breaking even, which is kind of the nature of things a lot of times. Yeah. But if you produce two of these and you find yourself at a loss financially,
it's hard to keep it going.
Oh yeah.
Oh no, I know exactly.
And honestly, after that, it's like, well, that can't happen anymore.
Yeah, and even if you love it too, I mean, even if the quality of your work is amazing, you can only do so much if you don't have a steady income coming in.
But also one of the trade-offs here, I mean, Kickstarter is still a good thing, but that's also one of the things that's been great about webcomics too.
Yeah.
That are just independently created and published webcomics.
There's just something special about doing webcomics that's just there's a lot less stress there than it is when you're going through something like DC or Marvel.
Right. Which isn't to say that there isn't something special about print as being in a comic shop right now.
Oh no, I'm not saying that. It's just I'm just saying.
You're right though, and there's. And also just having been somebody who's read Penny Arcade for years.
It makes sense, though, and though when you think about it, because it has a different mood, sort of. You can do it at your own pace, or, you can do it kind of as much or as little as you want to. It can be like just, I'm putting on 3 panels, and, I'm putting this out here, and I'm doing my work, but, that's all I can put out right now. And, maybe it'll take me 2 weeks to put out, like, a full, like, the equivalent of 3 pages. Maybe it'll take me 6 weeks. Maybe it'll take me, maybe it'll take me 2 months. But it's just there's kind of that difference there. But yeah, no, I've read Penny Arcade since it started. I've read Control Alt Delete, Mega Tokyo. I read a lot of. In fact, one of the Kickstarters two of the Kickstarters that I've funded started off as webcomics. That I just wanted to go. You know what? We want to continue doing our webcomic, but we also want to put out a trade, too. And we've been doing this for 2 years, and we want to try to put something out there. And I think that's actually a smart approach, too. If you can't get something started on your own, if you just, I wrote 6 comics, I want to Kickstarter so I can release them. But, just put them out on the web and gain an audience, and then try to go from there. And if people really respond well to it, then it'll work.
And I think any complaints about doing that or doing it through Indiegogo or any of these other ones where it's like, well, there could be a lot of ways. It's like, well, there could be, and that's why you should be reading what they're talking about and what they want.
And looking at the quality of their work, too.
Yeah, and if the work is coming out in quality and, okay, then that means...
They're dedicated and they care about what they're doing, and it's not just going out on a whim and just putting it out, put it out. You're putting it out because you're dedicated to your work and your craft. And you do it because you want to do it because you love it, not because you have any sort of other ulterior motives. You're doing it because you just love the work.
Yeah. But I mean that's the nature of mean, the internet is the ultimate double-edged sword for
Yeah.
for indie things. On the one hand, it leads to piracy and people not making any money on these smaller projects. On the other hand, it makes people aware of these smaller projects that otherwise they wouldn't be aware of.
Exactly.
It is both the best and the worst thing for indie comics, probably, and for indie anything. Really.
And anything really, music especially.
Yeah.
Nowadays, with everything going there. But everything's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Especially with the internet. But it's nice to see that trend, though. Whether or not that trend lasts, I hope it does. But whether or not that trend lasts, or however it goes, it's nice to see though that there is being more love being put back in indie comics.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, even if it's not like literally this indie.
Right. No, that's about as indie as you get right there.
This is not knocking the comic at
No.
all. I haven't read it. I'm guessing you have since you haven't.
Yeah.
But this isn't not.
I got it off the author's website. Like these are all the ones we didn't sell.
Yeah, this isn't knocking the quality of the work. This is just saying this is about as indie as you can possibly get. But even things like Top Cow, Boom, those guys still probably, in my opinion, qualify as indie.
Oh, sure.
Even though there's it's
Well,
smaller.
it's and sometimes the definition of indie does get a little bit over because people qualify Dark Horse as indie, which to the extent in that they don't have Disney owns Marvel and Warner Brother owns DC, so in that way, and whereas where Dark Horse owns Dark Horse, and in that way, Dark Horse owns Dark Horse and Image owns Image, so kind of indie, but they've become institutions
kind of become their own juggernauts that they can. But in a sense,
but they still, granted, I still really love them for what they do and how they help empower aspiring artists.
Well, if anything, they're perpetuating the standard of creator-owned, creator-driven content, original work, and trying to sell that instead of we have another Batman book, or we have another Superman book, or we have another Spider-Man book. Not that I'm saying I have anything against those, because I read 3 Spider-Man books for Pete's sake, and I read 2.
Yeah, this week, folks.
Yeah,
just this week.
Yeah, and it's not saying it's like we're not trying to be hipsters about it or anything.
No.
Where we're saying well we only read this.
Yeah.
We refuse to read anything else like that.
Well, no.
I appreciate companies like Dynamite, Top Cow, Boom, Image to an extent. I mean, I was just, like with Reed Gunther, I mean, not a lot of people read this.
No.
Not they should be, but not a lot of people do.
It's out there. It's one of those things where you just throw it out. I mean, it's out there in every way that I like.
The writer of Reed Gunther, is it Shane Hufton?
Yes.
Yeah.
I got to talk to him at Emerald City Comic Con, and
I
he
did.
We talked
was
about that.
seriously awesome.
No, that's what happened is I went up there